PSYCHIANT community, welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of psychology. Today, we're tackling a big topic, theories of learning in psychology. If you're a psychology enthusiast, student, or just curious about how we learn, this video is for you. We're going to explore the major theories that explain how humans and animals acquire new behaviors, skills, and knowledge, from classical conditioning to social learning. We'll break it all down in a way that's engaging and easy to understand. So, grab a notebook, get comfy, and let's dive into the science of learning. Oh, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more psychology content. Let's get started. Learning is at the core of human development. It's how we adapt, grow, and make sense of the world. But how does it actually happen? Psychologists have developed several theories to explain this process, and today we'll cover 5 major ones: behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, social learning theory, and connectivism. Ready? Let's go! First up, let's talk about behaviorism, one of the earliest and most influential theories of learning. Behaviorism focuses on observable behaviors and how they're shaped by the environment. It's all about stimulus and response. The idea is simple. Our behavior is learned through interactions with the world around us. Pavlov, a Russian physiologist, discovered classical conditioning in the early 1900s. After repeated pairings, the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus that can elicit the same response. On its own, this is called a conditioned response. Think about it. Have you ever felt hungry just hearing the sound of a microwave ping? That's classical conditioning in action. Here's how it works. Pavlov noticed that his dogs would salivate when they saw food. That's a natural response. But then, he started ringing a bell every time he presented the food. If the rat presses the lever, it gets a food pelleter reward. The rat quickly learns to press the lever more often. That's called positive reinforcement. But if pressing the lever gives the rat a mild electric shock, it'll avoid the lever. That's negative reinforcement or punishment, depending on the setup. Over time, the dogs began to associate the bell with food and would salivate just from hearing the bell, even if no food was present. Negative reinforcement removes something unpleasant, like turning off a loud alarm when you buckle your seat belt. And therapists use it to help people change habits, but it has its limits. It doesn't account for internal thoughts, emotions, or motivations. Which leads us to our next theory. Positive punishment adds something unpleasant, like a speeding ticket, while negative punishment takes away something pleasant, like grounding a teenager and taking away their phone. These principles are everywhere: parenting, education, even training your dog. Crazy, right? The key figures in this theory are Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. Let's break it down. 1. Classical conditioning. You've probably heard of Ivan Pavlov and his famous dogs. In technical terms, classical conditioning involves pairing a neutral stimulus like the bell with an unconditioned stimulus like food that naturally triggers a response, like salivation. Unlike classical conditioning, which is about automatic responses, operant conditioning focuses on voluntary behaviors and their consequences. Skinner believed that behavior is shaped by rewards and punishments. If a behavior leads to a positive outcome, we're more likely to repeat it. If it leads to a negative outcome, we're less likely to do it again. Classical conditioning isn't just about dogs. It's used in therapy, like treating phobias, and even in advertising. Ever wonder why certain jingles make you crave a burger? That's conditioning at work. 2. Operant conditioning. Next, we have operant conditioning, pioneered by B.F. Skinner. Skinner used a device called the Skinner box to study this. Picture a rat in a box with a lever. Here's a quick breakdown. Positive reinforcement adds something pleasant, like giving a child candy for doing homework. Behaviorism is powerful because it's practical and measurable. Teachers use it to encourage good behavior in classrooms. Enter cognitivism. The theory that says learning isn't just about stimulus and response, it's about what is happening inside our minds. Cognitivism emerged in the mid-20th century as a response to behaviorism's limitations. It focuses on mental processes like memory, problem-solving, and information processing. Think of your brain as a computer. It takes in information, processes it, and stores it for later use. Information comes in through our senses, gets processed in our short-term memory, and, if we rehearse or connect it to existing knowledge, moves to long-term memory. For example, when you study for a test, you're encoding information. If you review it regularly, it sticks in your long-term memory. But if you cram and forget to review, poof, it's gone. Let's explore some key ideas in cognitivism. That's cognitivism in action. It's also why mnemonic devices like acronyms or rhymes help us remember things better. 1. Information processing theory. But it still assumes learners are actively building knowledge. Which brings us to our next theory. One big idea in cognitivism is the information processing theory. This theory compares the human mind to a computer. This theory helps explain why techniques like chunking, breaking information into smaller, manageable pieces work so well. Ever memorize a phone number by grouping the digits? Ever wonder why good PowerPoint slides are simple and clear? That's cognitive load theory at work. Imagine trying to learn calculus while listening to a podcast and texting a friend. Your brain can't handle it all. Cognitive load theory suggests breaking tasks into smaller steps and minimizing distractions to optimize learning. 2. Cognitive load theory. Another key concept is cognitive load theory, developed by John Sweller. This theory says our working memory has limited capacity. If you overload it with too much information at once, learning becomes harder. This is super relevant for educators. For example, when teaching complex topics, teachers should present information gradually and use visuals to reduce cognitive load. Cognitivism revolutionized education by emphasizing how we process and organize information. It's why study strategies like spaced repetition or visual aids are so effective. Now, let's talk about constructivism, a theory that says learning is an active, constructive process instead of passively absorbing information. Learners build their own understanding based on their experiences and prior knowledge. Think of it like building a house. Each learner constructs their own mental framework brick by brick. As they encounter new experiences, they either assimilate them into existing schemas or accommodate by adjusting their schemas. For example, a child might think all four-legged animals are dogs. When they see a cat, they assimilate it as a dog at first. But when they learn it's a cat, they accommodate by creating a new schema. At first, they need training wheels or a parent holding the bike. That's scaffolding. But what happens when we learn by observing others? That's where our next theory comes in. As they gain confidence, the support is removed and they ride on their own. Vygotsky's ideas are huge in education, especially in collaborative learning environments like group projects or peer tutoring. The key figures here are Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. Let's dive in. Each stage reflects how children think and learn at different ages. For example, young kids in the pre-operational stage struggle with abstract concepts like conservation, the idea that quantity stays the same even if appearance changes. That's why a toddler might think a tall, skinny glass holds more water than a short, wide one, even if they contain the same amount. 1. Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Jean Piaget, a Swiss psychologist, argued that children learn by interacting with their environment and constructing mental models, or schemas. Piaget also proposed stages of cognitive development: sensoromotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. 2. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. Lev Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist, took constructivism further by emphasizing the role of social interaction and culture. His sociocultural theory says we learn through collaboration with others. Ever heard of the zone of proximal development? It tests the gap between what a learner can do alone and what they can do with help. A teacher or peer can provide scaffolding temporary support to help them bridge the gap. For example, Imagine a child learning to ride a bike. Constructivism is all about active learning. It's why hands-on activities, experiments, and discussions are so effective in classrooms. Social learning theory, developed by Albert Bandura, says we learn by observing others. It bridges behaviorism and cognitivism by combining environmental influences with mental processes. The big idea: we don't need to experience rewards or punishments ourselves, we can learn by watching what happens to others. Let's explore this further. In the study, children watched adults interact with a big inflatable clown. Some adults acted aggressively, hitting and kicking the doll, while others were neutral. Guess what? The kids who saw the aggressive behavior were more likely to mimic it. This showed that learning doesn't always require direct experience, it can happen through modeling. The Bobo doll experiment. You need to notice the behavior, remember it, be able to replicate it, and have a reason to do so, like expecting a reward. Think about how kids learn manners by watching their parents, or how teens pick up trends from social media. That's social learning in action. Bandura's famous Bobo doll experiment in the 1960s showed how kids learn through observation. But in today's digital age, how do we learn in a connected world? That brings us to our final theory. Bandura identified 4 steps in observational learning: attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Social learning theory is huge in understanding behaviors like aggression, empathy, or even consumer habits. It's why role models matter so much. Welcome to the 21st century, where connectivism takes learning to a whole new level. Proposed by George Siemens and Stephen Downes, connectivism is a theory for the digital age. Learning happens when we connect to these networks and access information. For example, you're learning right now by watching this video on YouTube. Connectivism emphasizes the ability to find, evaluate, and use information rather than just memorizing facts. From online courses to AI-driven learning platforms, connectivism is all about staying connected and adaptable. It says learning isn't just inside our heads or through social interactions, it's about creating and navigating networks of information. In a fast-changing world, knowing how to learn is just as important as what you learn. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe use operant conditioning to build a new habit or tap into connectivism by exploring a new online resource. Let us know how it goes. Thanks for watching, PSYCHIANT community, and we'll see you in the next video. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into psychology. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. That's why skills like critical thinking and digital literacy are so crucial today. In a world with Google, social media, and AI, connectivism is more relevant than ever. The core idea is that knowledge exists in networks. Think of the internet, databases, or even communities. Siemens outlined several principles of connectivism, like the importance of diverse perspectives, the need to stay current with information, and the ability to make decisions based on incomplete data. Teachers, therapists, and even marketers use these ideas every day to help people grow, change, and adapt. For us psychiants, understanding these theories not only deepens our love for psychology, but also helps us become better learners ourselves. Connectivism is still debated in psychology because it's so new, but it's reshaping how we think about education in the digital era. Wow, we've covered a lot today. From Pavlov's dogs to digital networks. The theories of learning in psychology give us a roadmap to understand how we acquire knowledge and skills. Let's recap. Behaviorism shows how our environment shapes us through rewards and punishments. Cognitivism dives into the mental processes behind learning, like memory and problem solving. Constructivism emphasizes building knowledge through experience and social interaction. Social learning theory highlights the power of observation and role models, and connectivism brings it all. Into the digital age with networked learning, each theory offers a unique lens on learning, and they're all relevant depending on the context. So, what's your favorite learning theory? Are you a fan of Pavlov's classical conditioning, or do you vibe more with connectivism in the digital world? Before we go, here's a challenge. Try applying one of these theories to your own learning this week. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and stay curious.